Okay, so let's get started with the quiz. Which of the following is not a primitive data type in Apex? String, list, integer, or boolean? So we are getting the answer as list, and that's correct. The answer is list only. Moving on to the next question. What is the default value of boolean data type or boolean variable in Apex? True, false, null, or zero? Let's check the answer. The default value of boolean variable is null. It is not false by default. So if you initialize any kind of variable, and we covered this in the variable and data type tutorial as well, that if you initialize any kind of variable in Apex, the default value is going to be null always, be it an integer variable, be it a boolean variable, be it a, let's say, string variable or anything else. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. What is the purpose of ID data type in Apex? Option A, to store the unique identifier of a Salesforce record. Option B, to store a large text field. Option C, to store a decimal number. And option D, to store a date and time. So the ID data type is used to store unique identifier of a Salesforce record. This is correct, Saurabh. Let's move on to the next question. Fourth question is, which primitive data type is used to store a decimal number with a specified precision and scale? And if I want to highlight something, I think it will be that specified precision and scale is the main point here, that which primitive data type is used to store a decimal number with a specified precision and scale. Okay, so the options are decimal, double, integer, or long. So the answer for this question is decimal. Why decimal? Because when we are talking about precision, right, we need very, I can say, accurate output. So which is why we use a decimal data type instead of a double data type. Double can sometimes round off values when we talk about precision and scale. So let's say if you want to have a lot of decimal points, or I can say lot of numbers or lot of digits after the decimal point, right? It's given in the Salesforce documentation that the recommended variable, or I can say data type, is decimal, not double. So the answer will be decimal for this question. And this is covered again in the data type and variable tutorials as well, which we recently created. So the next question is that what is the difference between date and date time data types in Apex? The first option we have here is that date data type includes only the date, while the date time data type includes both the date and time. Option B is the date data type includes both date and time, while the date time data type includes only the date. Option C is there is no difference between date and date time data types. And option D is the date data type is used for arithmetic operations, while the date time data type is used for logical operations. So what do you think will be the correct answer? Okay, everyone is saying option A. Let's move on to the answer. And everyone is correct. The answer is the date data type only includes the date, while date time data type includes both date and time. Let's move on to the next one. How can you convert a string to a date in Apex? So the question will be visible on the screen in a bit. Yeah, so these are the four options that we have. Using the date.valueOf method, using the date.parse method, using date.format method, and using the date.newInstance method. So you want to convert a string to a date in Apex. How can you do that? Okay, so Saurabh is saying option A, using the date.valueOf method. Anyone else? Okay, again an A. Let's move on to the answer. So you all are correct. The answer is using the date.value of method. If you pass a string in date.value of, it will be converted into a date. And this is pretty much the same method for every data type. So even if you want to convert, let's say, I think an ID into a string, then you can use string.value of method. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm taking the right example or not, but we have value of methods for different data types using which you can convert one data type to another. That's what I want to mention. Let's move on to the next question. Question number 7. And I'll just wait for it to be on your screens and then I'll read it. So the 7th question is, what is the difference between a list and a set in Apex? Option A says a list allows duplicate elements, whereas a set does not. Option B says a set allows duplicate elements, whereas a list does not. Option C is there is no difference between a list and a set. And option D is lists are smaller, while set can store large volumes of data. What do you think will be the answer? Okay, so Shivam is saying A, Ajit is also saying A. Which means that a list can store duplicate elements, whereas a set cannot. Okay. Anyone else? Otherwise, we'll move on to the answer. Again, an A. Okay. Okay, great. Let's move on to the answer. So the answer says that a list allows duplicate elements while a set does not. So all of you are correct that in a list we can have duplicate elements, whereas in case of a set we cannot have duplicate elements. Let's move on to the next question, which will be question number 8. And we have 12 questions in total. So only 4 questions are left. I mean 5 questions are left. So the 8th question is, which collection data type is used to store key value pairs? So out of these collections, in which collection can you store key value pairs? Is it list? Is it set? Is it map? Or is it tuple? Okay, so we are getting the answer as C from Shivam and Saurabh. Ajit is also saying C. Okay, let's move on to the answer then. So the answer is correct, which is C, that is map. Because in map, we store key value pairs, right? We have a key and then we have a value. And using the key, we can get the value from a map as well. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, I was wondering for a second that what is the option X here. But yeah, no worries. C is correct. Moving on to the next question, we have, how can you check if a list is empty in Apex? Option A says using the isEmpty method. Option B says using the size method. Option C using the contains method. And option D is using the clear method. Okay, so Shivam is saying A, Saurav is saying A. Again, Ajit also says A. Let's check out the answer then. So we can check if a list is empty in Apex using the isEmpty method. Okay. So all of you are correct. How do we apply this isEmpty method? I mean, you just need to take the variable name, or I can say the list name, and then you can say dot and then isEmpty, and it will give you a true or a false based on whether the list is empty or not. The next question says, you need to store a list of customer names where each customer name is a string. So which data type will you use? List of string, set of string, map of string, or a string array? Okay, so everyone is saying A, and now I'm thinking I have a lot of questions with answer as A, actually. Let's check out the answer. So the answer is correct. That is list of string. Although, if I talk about list of string or string arrays, I would say both are, both can be used, because in Apex, if you do something like string of array, or I can say string and then these empty brackets, you will also create a list only. This is also going to create a list. So in a way, both are correct, but list of string is more appropriate if we talk about syntax of Apex. So we hardly use, I haven't seen, at least in my career, using string of arrays, though technically it's not wrong. I think we can also create a list using string and then array notation, but list of string is more appropriate to use in general. So we have a question in the chat which says, why don't we use size? And I think this is related to the previous question where we were saying that how to check if a list is empty or not, and the answer was to use the list is empty method. We can use the size method as well, I would say, because it gives you the size of the list, like Shivam mentioned. But the point is that, again, I'm not, I can say, aware of the underlying implementation of is empty method or size method. But if you think of in general, let's say if you have to implement these two methods by yourself, right? If you want to write the is empty method by yourself, and if you want to write the size method by yourself, so what will you do? For size method, you are going to iterate through the whole list, and then you are going to find out that what is the size of the list, right? Which is going to take longer time. But if you want to just tell if a list is empty or not, then you will just check that whether this list contains a single element or not. So even if we have a single element in the list, you will say that a list is not empty. Otherwise, you will say that the list is empty, right? So considering these two approaches, is empty makes more sense because it is going to take less time. For example, if I talk about in terms of time complexity, it should take O1 time, whereas the size method should take ON time, right? So this is why we use is empty method instead of size. Again, I'm not aware of the underlying implementation of this, but in general, like this should be the case, which is why we prefer is empty over size. I hope this is clear. Okay, so moving on to question number 11, we have, you need to store the list of email addresses where each email address is a string. Which data type will you use? List of Boolean, set of string, map of string, or list of integer? Okay, so yes, constant time in case of is empty. Yeah, that's correct. So I'm getting B as the answer for this one. Anyone else? Shivam is also saying B. Okay. Okay, so B is correct because out of the options that we have currently, set of string makes more sense, and because we want to store a list of email addresses. And I want to mention one thing here because it depends on the scenario you are dealing with. So sometimes, even though email addresses should be unique, we might need to use a list instead of set. It depends on what kind of scenario you are dealing with. So let's say, for example, let's say you're processing some records and some custom records. Let's say you're processing some applications, right? And you have some candidates where you have stored the email addresses of those candidates. Now, based on the applications, you want to send emails to all the candidates that are linked to a selected set of applications, right? Now, it might be possible that one candidate has two applications. So in that case, you should not send two emails to those candidates or to a single candidate, to be specific. So in this scenario, what I'll do, I'll create a set of string and I'll store all the email addresses from the candidates to the set of string instead of creating a list, because set will store unique email addresses, or I can say unique values inside itself. But in some cases, for example, in case of a trigger, a list might make more sense as well. And again, we can think of a scenario for this. like I showed in case of set. But in general, whenever we want to store unique values, we prefer a set over a list. Though list of string is not in the option, so considering this question, I think set of string is definitely correct. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. And this is going to be the last one. So the last question says, you need to store a map of customer IDs to their corresponding names. Which data type would you use? And the options are map of string, list of string, set of string, or map of integer and string. Okay, Saurabh says A. Anyone else? We are again getting A. Shivam is also saying A. Kiku is also saying A. Okay, let's move ahead to the answer. So the answer is correct. Not correct actually. We are going to use map of integer and string instead of map of string of string. Why? Because we are storing a map of customer IDs to their corresponding names, right? So the ID, I mean, again, it depends on what you are thinking. ID, you can think of ID as a string as well. But in general, like if you see any ID in a table, right? Even if you're interacting with an external database as well. So yeah, again, that's what I said, Shivam, that it depends on what you are thinking. ID can be alphanumeric as well. If you talk about Salesforce, but in general, what I'm talking about is that let's say if you are integrating with an external system, for example, then it might be possible that the primary key is an integer, which is why we have mentioned that the answer will be map of integer and string. But again, this is not, I would say A is also correct if you think of alphanumeric IDs or if you think of IDs which could not be stored in an integer but a string. So I'm not saying D is the only correct option. A is also fine, but it depends on what you are thinking. So if you're thinking of an integer ID, I think map of integer and string makes more sense. And if you think of string ID, map of string and string makes more sense. But as you all are thinking in terms of Salesforce IDs, which are alphanumeric, then definitely map of string and string is also fine. Or I should say, instead of map of string, we should have map of ID and string in that case, because we are talking about Salesforce IDs, right? So it should be ID of string. Okay, so the question was not specific to Salesforce IDs, just to mention it. But yeah, if you talk about Salesforce IDs, map of ID of string is the best option. Otherwise, it can be map of string if the ID is alphanumeric. Otherwise, if it's integer, it can be map of integer and string. But it should be a map, so like everything is correct. Okay, so that's all I think I had for this quiz. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to move to the last slide, and it will have some important links. So I'm going to look for your feedback, and I'm going to share a form here using which you can share your feedback and you can get notified about future videos as well. And I'm sharing this form in the chat as well. So do give your feedback and let me know if I should keep such kind of quizzes in future after some tutorials. And I'll try to keep those. And there are some other links about LinkedIn, Telegram, channels and groups where you can be updated about future tutorials. So feel free to join those as well. Is that possible to make video on data cloud, AI, industry cloud? Definitely, yes, it is possible. These things are very new, I would say, which is why I have yeah, just give me 1 second. Because I received this question yesterday as well from someone who was asking me that if I can create a tutorial on Agentforce. So what I have is, let me share that here as well. I have a link, which is this one. So this is a limited edition trailhead, I think, on Agentforce, just in case you want to go through this. And you can check this out. And I'll try to make tutorials on data cloud, AI, and industry cloud as well. But again, the use cases are very, very limited, or I can say very few people are working on data cloud as of now, from what I know, which is why I'm focusing on the basics at the moment. I want to, make you an expert in Apex, because Apex is something which is used in every cloud, or I can say everywhere in Salesforce. But yeah, definitely I'll try to create tutorials on these going forward. Is then Instagram? Yeah, it is the same handle. If you search for SFDC stop, it will be there. And we have some short videos on Instagram related to what is double, what is integer, and some other tutorials as well. Okay, so if there are any questions, that's fine. I can stay. Otherwise, we are good to end this quiz. And thanks everyone for joining. So basic is very important. Please continue. Yeah, definitely. This series will be continued for now, because we'll move on to I can say complex scenarios as well. So once all the topics are complete, we'll move on to trigger scenarios and everything else which is complex in Apex. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so I'll look forward to your feedback, and thanks everyone for joining the quiz. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Take care.